Hi guys, welcome to another special Team Fun interview. I am lucky enough to be here with the whole crew from MegaCat Games, but right now, Zach Manco at the New York Games Conference, which is really cool. You guys allowed me to come here and do this with you guys.
We're happy to have you.
Good. No, awesome. This is great. So, Zach, what do you do at MegaCat Studios?
So I am a project manager, and what that means in any project, I kind of do what I need to do to help it move forward, help it reach success. So whether that's, doing some creative end things like game design and writing, or whether it's more, putting people in their lane, setting them up for success. Right. Whatever needs done, I'm happy to do.
So it's really making, you're the one at the switchboard, making sure all the connections are in the right place, and awesome. So how long have you been with MegaCat?
So I started freelance writing for them about 2 years ago, and it's very fortunate actually that I came on board right as the company was starting to launch and scale. So that enabled me to get in on the ground floor, so to speak, and now take a more prominent role.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And before that, were you doing any sort of project management within gaming in general? Is this kind of like a whole different experience move for a job like this?
Not within the gaming world, no. Mostly in then video games, I was doing, freelance writing, doing stories and plotting and characters and whatnot. But, I did have some office jobs where I would be taking a similar role as far as project management. Yeah.
How's the experience been so far?
It's been great. It's very fulfilling to work in games. It's great to work with all these cool companies, especially there's some, awesome companies here at the New York Games Conference, some real thought leaders and industry luminaries. So it's been a blast for sure.
Cool. So for anyone watching who maybe this is the first time hearing about that, why don't you talk a little bit about what MegaCat Studios does, the kind of games you guys do, all of that?
Certainly. So we do mostly contract work for hire. We've done games for Boston Scientific, for example. But our heart and soul is we make brand new, all original retro games. So new games for the NES, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, 2018 releases for them. So,
how's that been? Because I imagine it's a lot of the people you're finding either have been rebuilding their own, old systems to get them work again, or sitting there cursing themselves for, selling it to their little brother or something, years ago.
Absolutely. So, the retro market is not as big as we'd like it to be, obviously. As you said, not everyone has a Nintendo. Sadly, not everyone has a Nintendo in the front and center in their entertainment system. So it's always been more of a labor of love for us. We do it because we love it. We'll always do it because, we believe in these systems. We grew up with them. We have, a connection with them. Right. But we also have PC games, some VR titles as well. So we try to, cover everything from the retro, from the old to the new. And really, one of our main design elements is marrying the best of retro games with modern gaming trends. So we'll do something like throw achievements into an NES game it's never been done before, and by the same token we'll try to apply what's great about a retro game to some of our modern titles. Things like fun for fun's sake, game mechanics that are easily accessible, that can pick up well and really engage the player for a memorable experience.
So when you first jumped on, what was that like? You're getting kind of pitched this idea of, hey, we're going to go ahead and make games for the Super Nintendo, and not just like, the big indie scene right now where everyone's making a 16-bit game, right, and selling it on the Nintendo Switch store. This is legitimately cartridges that people can buy and blow on and slam into their system, probably breaking the system like I did, but nonetheless. What was that mindset going? Did you thought this was like, you guys are crazy, or? Oh yeah, it
felt a little bit strange, should we really take a run at this? But we'd been doing contract work for a while, and we wanted to do our own IP, and we were talking about, what target platform and things like that. We all grew up with the NES, and we're like, well, why not? Like, let's just do that. And we had so much fun doing it that we decided to run at it a little bit harder. So it definitely has its own, challenges. Physical distribution when everything's, online now is a bit of a pickle, especially, you can't, once an NES game is out, you can't put out a patch or an update for anything for it. So you have to make sure everything's perfect before it leaves. So, but yeah, it does sound crazy, but at the same time, it's definitely unique. I think there's a lot of people that kind of grew up with that are in positions now with some of the companies we work with where, it strikes a chord with them. So, yeah, has its advantages as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. now and then now we're starting to see. I mean, we've always kind of had a retro resurgence the last couple of years,
Certainly.
but I think with the advent of things like the NES Classic, the Super NES Classic, now Neo Geo's getting in with Mini Arcade, like all these companies that were making the games that are kind of inspiring, you guys and everyone to get into this in the first place, are creating their own systems. Does that create a shift that you guys see? Is there an opportunity there as far as like whether it's coming up with your own kind of classic style hardware with your games or finding ways onto these systems if they ever open up their shops? Like where's the mindset now going into the age of the mini classic systems?
I would love it to see some Mecha Cat Studios titles on the NES, the NES Classic, Super Nintendo Classic for sure. But I think just in general, the interest in these, and like you mentioned, this retro renaissance of this new renewed focus on these games and the kind of the classic platforms that are out there. All that's great. I think it's wonderful for us. I think it's wonderful for the gaming industry to kind of revisit its history and these systems and see what they had to offer and to kind of bring on this new generation of fans and things like the NES controllers for the Nintendo Switch. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So like I said, I think it's only helpful for us, certainly.
Cool. And I know you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's still going on, the Kickstarter for the Logjammer's Upmake, right?
That's correct.
And that's going to be available on Steam, and so that will be downloadable. Are the current NES, Sega, the games you currently have in classic form, are those downloadable? Any plans to make that to maybe reach a wider audience, or is what makes it special and being able to have it the kind of collector idea of like you get the cartridge and only you can play this kind of thing?
I think there's certainly an appeal to being able to release it to a wider audience. And by the same token, like you mentioned, there's definitely this kind of, this nostalgia that we're trying to, resonate with when we release a physical thing that you can hold in your hands, and it brings back memories of, driving back from the video game store with your mom in the back seat and tearing open the box and looking at the manual.
I was going to say that there are manuals in these, right? Because I miss that so much.
Oh, yeah. Full color manuals, full color boxes for sure. Manuals are great because it allows us to do tutorials and things like that, gives us more room in the game for more game as opposed to, like holding your hand to teach you the game. But, releasing them in a digital format is definitely something we're exploring, whether it's a downloadable title or, releasing the ROMs in a way that they can't be, shared and stolen, pirated essentially. It's definitely something we're exploring to kind of, as you mentioned, reach a wider audience.
Great, cool. Now let's talk about the collection aspect of this, because I remember, when we stopped by your guys' booth at AVGC, one of the things that really caught our eye were the wooden Logjammer systems like that. What is the process of even kind of coming up with that idea, let alone, building that out? And are there other sort of ideas you're toying around with that for future games as well, for like these other material cartridges?
So when we do a retro release, we always do a special limited edition shell. So case in point is Logjammers. We have on a wooden NES cartridge that's fully functional, but the game's about lumberjacks and axes and log jamming. So the wooden cartridge just makes sense, and it's a really neat collector's piece. A lot of the retro world, a lot of them are these collectors that have these massive expansive collections, and we want something that's ready to go on the shelf, looks nice, that they're proud of. So we always keep that in mind when we do a limited edition. So we always try to theme them as well. Creepy Brawlers was our movie monster boxing game that had this really neat acrylic shell that had this like Halloween type scene. It was like old scary castle on the hill with some bats flying out. It was beautiful glossy black finish. Little Medusa is a Greek mythology themed game, so we have these cool pillars. It's a really heavy shell with gold inlay in the title. So anytime we release a title, we always try to release something, the limited edition that kind of is in theme with it for sure. Yeah. That's
awesome. So maybe this is, asking you to, pick your favorite son, so to speak. But growing up in the generation of the 16-bit era, Sega, Super Nintendo?
For me, it's Sega all day, absolutely.
It's okay, nobody's perfect, it's fine. And so now that you guys are building stuff for that, what's that? Does that change your mind ever? Or is it that you now pick Sega because you realize it's different to develop for?
Right, it actually reinforces, I grew up with the Sega. I had NES and then Sega Genesis. I never really had a Super Nintendo when I was younger. You know, I have played them since then. But so number one, nostalgia for me. Number two, absolutely developing for these consoles is all sorts of challenges, you know, in its own right. We were fortunate when we chose the NES to start with. There was a very supportive and knowledgeable community that we could kind of work with and, you know, borrow knowledge from there. And then when we started making the games and were successful at it, we gave back, you know, we published blogs that explain like everything that we did and kind of like the new tricks that we kind of realized or came up with or how we did certain things to, like I said, give back and, you know, kind of push that community forward as well. Sega Genesis had something similar. The Super Nintendo, it doesn't. It's so incredibly complex that there's really not a strong like homebrew scene around it because it's so difficult. There's not a lot of Super Nintendo homebrew games. So it's weird, but we're almost pioneers in that space, pioneers for a 30-year-old system where, you know, we're having to figure out, you know, a lot of things for ourselves. So whenever we do manage to, you know, develop a tool or a trick or, you know, figure something out, we'll publish a blog about it again to kind of like spark that. Right. So the Genesis, you know, number one, nostalgia. Number two, easy to develop for. You know, for me, it's just hitting all the right notes. Absolutely.
That's great. That's great. Now, are there any games you've kind of like you remember being kind of crap when you rented it from Blockbuster, but now you look back on it being like, oh, well, because this is how it is developed, I understand that now.
No, absolutely. You know, I have a new respect for any games. I think that's something common you find across people that work in the gaming industry is whenever they play a game, it's hard to turn off the critical, like, oh, how'd they do that? Or like, why'd they do it this way? And just enjoy it, you know? So absolutely, looking at the old games, you know, you think like, oh, well, it'd be so cool if they could have just done, you know, X, Y, Z. And then now you realize like, wow, X, Y, and Z are all impossible.
So, what were your favorites growing up? You said you were a Sega guy, and NES because you had that first. What are the ones? And I mean, it's easy to say like I love Sonic, that kind of stuff. Right. I'm talking like the hidden gems, the ones that you bring up and people have to try to remember. What were some of those favorites for you?
So definitely favorite Sega game is Shadowrun on the Sega Genesis. There was a Shadowrun. It's based off a tabletop RPG, which I've also played and loved. And there's a Shadowrun for the Super Nintendo. And me personally, I think the Sega version is way better. It's wild because it's essentially an open world RPG on the Sega Genesis. You know, it has a plot that you go through, but it has a tons of side quests, but you can kind of do what you want, go where you want, level up your characters. It has all this stuff that you would find almost like in a modern, you know, like The Witcher or something like that. Right. This big expanse.
Well, it's even kind of a precursor to the original Fallout games. That same kind of isometric and like, what the fuck do I do now, right? Kind of thing.
No, absolutely, yeah, definitely. It strikes all those chords, absolutely, yeah.
Cool. So as far as, why don't you talk about a little bit real quick about the games you guys have set up here. You have 3 games, it looks like, on display on the, you know, very kind of classic TVs you have here, which it only just adds to the flavor, I'm sure. Talk a little bit about what you've got there.
So we have Log Jammers for the NES, which, as we talked about, the PC upmake is on Kickstarter right now. We're planning on porting that to the modern consoles, PS4, Xbox One, and the Switch. We have the Nintendo version here with us. It's a cool arcade action sports game, you know, very fast-paced, very dynamic, great for tournaments or couch co-op. On the Super Nintendo, we have Fork Parker's Crunch-Out, which is a collaboration with Devolver Digital and the Take This charity. Oh, wow. It uses Devolver's fake CFO mascot, Fork Parker, who's this curmudgeonly old man obsessed with, you know, profit margins and everything. And it uses that as a vehicle to kind of like tongue-in-cheek talk about this very serious problem of crunch in the gaming industry. Oh, man. And then on the Genesis, we have Little Medusa, which is actually our first multi-platform release. First on the Nintendo, and now it's available on the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo as well. And it's an top-down action puzzler where you play as the daughter of Zeus has been transformed into a Medusa, you know, a Gorgon, and you have to solve puzzles to take back Mount Olympus.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You guys have anything in the works you can talk about yet? I mean, obviously you got the Kickstarter thing going on right now, but what's next in the future? And even if it's not, you know, there's nothing you can announce yet, I guess what's next for the company in the future? So
we definitely have many more titles in the pipeline. There's no shortage of retro goodness that we'll be bringing you. You know, the cat is growing for sure. You can expect more PC titles, more 16-bit titles. I think long-range goals would be moving into maybe even the next generation of platforms. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, there's definitely more from the cat for sure.
I am here with Nate Flynn. Nate, what do you do with MegaCat?
I'm a creative lead, so my job is to take a client's sort of vision, how they see either their brand or their product or the placement that they want for whatever we're helping them with, and see to it that that vision goes through the filter of our expertise and comes out as something really, really cool for the end user.
Cool. So how long have you been doing stuff with MegaCat?
I'm actually shiny brand new. So I worked independently, did some contract work, did some stuff in the educational game space, and then they showed me Little Medusa, and they sort of like seduced me on board. And also the team clicked. Like, there's a lot of really, really cool, really creative individuals at MegaCat, and they're doing something that like is really unique because they started with the retro console thing, and then just were able to like really scale it up, where they're doing like B2B contact, where they can take that retro sensibility, that efficiency of design, that really distinct, beautiful look, and then take it into modern environments with games that include network play and things that have, a broader user base, integrate with all the platforms, modern streaming platforms, Mixer, Twitch. So it was this really neat space of it scales to just about anything. So it was way too appealing not to jump in.
No, I'm sure. And it's interesting talking about games as a B2B thing, because I think back to branded games in my youth, and I'm thinking like the Chester Cheetah games for Super Nintendo, or like Cool Spot on Sega, kind of stuff like that. But at first glance, I'm kind of looking at this stuff, and this doesn't feel like the cheap shill for branded content gaming. This is very much kind of a games first initiative. And so speak to a little bit of that. How is that process as far as trying to find the balance between being a branded game and being, a game that's kind of stands on its own two legs?
So it's a creativity first process. Your integrity is like definitely something that you bring to the table, your experience, and realistically for like those like slap a label on it kind of processes, it's they know what they're doing and that it's going to come out like that. But if that's where it being really bespoke about it, being like really intimate with what the representation of what they want out in the market is. Like, everyone has their brand identity, everyone knows who they are, and it's just reflecting that in a way that's fun and keeps the engagement really high that players are really enjoying. So it's about not necessarily just putting the brand sticker on it and shoving it on the shelf. It's about taking the essence of what their message is and putting that in a game form that is very fun.
So we're in the just the design process, the creative process. Does this happen? Does usually the game conception comes out of the meeting with these companies, or is it, hey, I have this idea, I'm pitching it to you, or is it kind of just, it really depends on the situation?
Fully flexible platform in that regard. Like some people have like a very like concise, idea of what they want and how they want it represented. Other people are a little bit more open to, hey, how do you think this should be reflected? And it works in any regard. Like, neither process is, incorrect in any way. So it can go either way. So anyone who had even a vague idea, we could flush it out, or someone who just wanted a pitch, we could put together like, hey, here's a great way to do what you have as a brand. Like, we'd probably sit down, get to know them as like, as a client and as what, who they are and how they feel about like being represented, and just let the correct game evolve out of that scenario.
Cool, man. So I guess is like bringing up classic gaming kind of a hard sell for these brands? Because I see often, the easy sell sounds like it's mobile gaming, right? It's something a lot of people are doing right now. It's thrown out there to come in and kind of say, hey, we want to make a game with you guys for a system that has been considered obsolete by a lot of people. Does that become a hard thing, or is the collector sell of like, hey, this still has a fan base, people are still playing these things, and this is a one-of-a-kind item that no one else can offer you? Does that kind of help you guys bring people on board?
Okay, well, yeah, like the physical goods, the collector, that nostalgia, you go home and you have a brand new game for your NES, is something that we do, and it's, it's at the core of our philosophy. But we do modern platform. We will do mobile, we will do PC. Actually, this year, Coffee Crisis will be releasing on PS4 and the Switch, It's already out on Xbox, Mixer integrated, ready to go. So the retro sensibility is really like what the core of who we are is. Like we bring those design ethics and that very like handmade experience there, but we can do modern platforms. So it's, I mean, maybe in a scenario where saying, hey, maybe a retro game doesn't fit you, we can do something with retro sensibilities or retro aesthetic, or, you know, something that very heavily leans on that sort of mentality, and we can do it in a modern platform, in a modern form factor. And actually, you know, we're even in the VR, AR space, but it just comes from a design ethic, like of, you know, different utilization process.
And I'm assuming finding the right fit, just seeing what, you know, what syncs up with everybody involved, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, there is definitely the right game for a scenario. There's no shoehorning. You can't do that. It'll be a mess for everyone involved. So really, you know, really strong contact with the client and deciding, hey, this is what's right for you, and, you know, coming to that agreement, that sort of like realizing their vision through, you know, digital entertainment that we create.
Yeah. Cool, man. So I'm assuming gamer growing up, as with many people in kind of our generation growing up with like 16-bit games and stuff, what side were you on, Sega or Super Nintendo?
Oh, I'm actually, my NES was dearly loved, but I grew up really lucky because my parents found out that I'd gotten in way too much trouble when I went outside. And my dad actually had like a really strong thing in electronics. So we had an Odyssey, we had a 2600, and like his consoles that were sort of left over for me. And then we still had the NES that like, my dad might have missed me being born to go pick it up. Like that might have been a thing. So those were still around, but Nintendo was my jam. Like that was through and through. But yeah, and I still deeply love my Apple IIe.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Has your perspective on these classic systems and classic games changed since you've started working on, I guess, modern classics like this? Especially since you kind of see a little more how the sausage is made. Has that sort of helped you look back on your old games, kind of be like, oh, okay, this makes a little more sense maybe why this game I didn't like so much was like this, or I see what about this other game I really loved, and how that all kind of comes together?
It's given me an appreciation of like games that do a lot with a little. Actually, like circling back to like some stuff, and especially like arcade games got ported over, like I can see what was lost in translation there, like, and exactly why, like why there's like a huge variety of the Joust ports that are just weird and awkward. But yeah, and it's like it definitely given me appreciation of designers like creating small experiences that have high repeat value. I look for these games that have like really small central mechanic that goes a lot of places, and how much mileage they got out of it. And like it's sort of appreciating like minimalism in some games, because like I'm way into like just like let's just creep scope up a little bit, just a little bit. But and you know that can kind of be a thing. But these people who like stick to this like strict minimalism, I was like, man, you stuck to your guns, and that is like amazing.
That's awesome, man. Talk a little bit about the games you guys have on display today.
Okay, right now out there we have Little Medusa. No hiding the fact that like really strong bias. That's my personal favorite in the lineup. Like I dearly love that. We got Fork Parker's Crunch Out. That one was a collaboration with Devolver Digital, and that one's really cool. Like sort of, you know, simulating some of the negative sides of the game industry. Like the people are pretty aware of like crunch being a problem and being, you know, psychologically damaging to the people working on the games and things like that. So like this is sort of lampooning that with a very like a character that Devolver has, Fork Parker, that's like just horrible. He's like the worst. Yeah, then we are also showing Logjammers, which that one is live on Kickstarter right now. That one is one that's going across platforms. That's one of the games that's going to like, you know, transcend from the stuck in a retro console to multiple platforms. That's really exciting, because while the retro console, it's a very cool tactile experience, not everyone really wants that. Like some of them just might be a dedicated PC gamer, but they still want to have that really authentic retro experience. So that sort of seeing games that are going to span that's just like another really exciting thing. It's like, look, this is very, very authentic retro experiences, but they span for everyone now.
Do you guys have to have like specially modded like dev kits, or do you kind of can go in the old systems and like tool around with it?
Well, they work on the old systems, but like in terms of actually like writing the cartridges, like writing the actual data to a cartridge, that's a whole separate like setup of equipment. And there are actually different boards and stuff like that. So there's a couple of setups. Yeah.
Cool. So how's the network kind of in the early part of the day for New York's Games Conference, but how's it been here for you so far? I've seen so far some people stopping by, asking questions about the booth. I know some of the first set of talks are going on right now, but just how's this process been setting things up and talking with people?
The conference itself, everyone's like in a really great mood. It's also like gorgeous out. That might have something to do with it. So people have been really friendly, and it's really cool because the media conference includes people from like not just specifically video games here today, but other services that might apply, and really realizing like just how much like the community around all of these technology-based medias have to overlap. Like even the people that are the furthest apart have at least one connecting point on which they can like share information, talk with each other. So it's been really cool getting like some neat thoughts on like even like cloud-based management stuff for assets and like how that could be structured and tailored.
That's great. Are there any talks so far happening today that you're excited to sit on?
Oh yeah, definitely Game Critic Roundtable. Harold from the New York Games Critic Circle's there, and I've just recently read his book, and like definitely gonna like sit over his shoulder and like see what he's about. He has a really like cool like personal writing style, and like I'm like, I've imagined talking to you in my head, so like let's see how that happens. So like that one's exciting. I mean, there's a bunch of other like really cool industry leaders here that they've got like a really interesting top-down view and like sort of gleaning from their experience and getting like how they view the market is going to be an interesting perspective point. So there's tons of talks, and I'm sure like I'd have to go through the agenda to like pick out like absolutely everyone, but a lot of really exciting engagement here.
I'm here with Andy Marsh from MegaCat Studios. Andy, talk a little bit about what you do with MegaCat.
I'm our lead designer, so I tend to do a lot of project management, and recently I've been describing it as kind of, I'm the middleman between art and design and development, where I'll take people's artwork and kind of digest it in a way that the development will be comfortable with working with.
Okay.
Kind of the guy that sort of makes the developers' lives easier, going from just like art and design.
Cool. So how long have you been with MegaCat?
I've been with MegaCat for about 3.5 years now.
Cool, and how's that been so far?
It's been a blast. I get to make video games for consoles that I grew up playing, like the stuff that influenced me as someone who plays video games. Now I get to make stuff for.
But before that, were you in the video game space?
As like a personal hobby, I did a lot of like reading, and I would do some design stuff, technical design stuff for classic consoles as well. I would do in my off time and learn about the technical hurdles of designing artwork for that and creating images following those hurdles. So I just sort of did it as something I love to do.
Right. So you already kind of came in to MegaCat, with kind of that love for retro gaming and sort of the knowledge and know-how behind. It probably put you ahead of other people for the position, just as far as like you're already looking into, hey, what were the limitations, and not just doing it as art for art's sake.
It's you don't get into doing that kind of stuff unless you really love doing it. It's definitely different than just creating art. It's creating art with these sometimes it almost feels abstract, the limitations put on them, and like learning how to work with those and stuff. It's something you had to have dedicated some of your own personal time to, or else you're probably not going to know it.
Now, is it primarily working within just like the 8-bit or 16-bit pixel space, or is there even more to the limitations than just kind of sort of the square pointillism style of pixelation?
Oh yeah, definitely. Each console has its own restrictions on the amount of colors you can use. Like for the NES, your palette is 3 colors plus a common color across all the other palettes, and so learning how to work with that kind of stuff and the way the consoles like select palettes on a per tile basis, it's all very different, like a very different way of approaching art.
Cool. So you guys got a couple games here on display right now. Which ones here are the ones that you've worked on? Have you worked on all of them, or have you been here for 3 years now? What has the experience been like, kind of working on the various games you've done so far?
I've definitely had something to do with all of them. I'm not gonna say I'm not like the artist on all of them or anything, but I've definitely from something like Fort Parker, where I just served more as a technical lead. I would take like really great artwork that some of our guys did and take it and manipulate it in a way that the SNES would understand it and that our developers would have an easy time working with. I sort of served that role for that game. For Little Medusa, I took our original cutscene artwork that one of our other artists created and added things like sprite overlays so that they could be more animated, have more colors.
Cool. Okay.
And so that tends to be the role I fill when it comes to the actual art side of things. And then beyond that, I help manage the projects themselves and make sure everything's functioning the way we want it to.
Awesome, man. That's so cool. So, you had done sort of your research before on, the limitations of these consoles and stuff. Has looking at those limitations kind of shape the way you view some of your favorite games from the past that you grew up with, and kind of be like, oh, that makes sense why that's way, or what the heck were these guys thinking?
Yeah, there's a very important reason why Mike Tyson's Punch-Out doesn't have a 2-player mode. There's actually about 1 million different reasons. That's everybody always wanted like 2 players and be able to play as the guys you fight, and there's like about 1 million different reasons why that would have never worked.
Really?
Yeah. So
can you give an example of that, like one of them, one of the million?
Yeah, sure. First off, you can't load that much graphics into an NES's very limited amount of RAM at once. There's just too much of it. And then another one is the way it handles like your player character versus theirs are handled completely differently, and so trying to manipulate a game to work with both would be a nightmare.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's definitely reasons why you learn the reasons why things were the way they were.
It allows you to either be a little bit easier on some games or probably a little harder on others.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely some games that I'll look at and like, oh, they could have done that way different, like way more efficiently.
So, what was it like when you started with Mega Cat, or I guess when you even discovered what these guys were doing? Because it's, when you see it in person, as I've gotten to do now, first at AVGC when we talked to you guys then, but now here, kind of seeing the games, it's really trippy. There's something so like familiar, but at the same time knowing that I've not played this game before.
Yeah, no, it's a fun process. I think all of us would all say one of our favorite things about it is getting to add modern sensibilities to that kind of thing. So an example would be like Coffee Crisis. The initial release was on the Sega Genesis, but it's a Sega Genesis game that like references Wi-Fi and stuff, So it adds this extra level to the experience that's like makes it really crazy to behold sometimes. Or like talking about the internet and stuff in an NES game,
Right. I know this is more of a hardware thing, but you guys have these great, also looking like these limited edition pieces. Like I think of Log Jammers in the wooden case, or Little Medusa with kind of the pillar and that kind of like almost marbleized and gold inlay look. Does that case have any sort of effect on the, like, whether or not you have to build into it in a different way, or is it really just an outer shell and it makes no difference there?
It's more like an outer shell. We what we do is we design the cases around the circuit board, and so that way, like, sort of fits in there snug, and it doesn't cause any weird hardware issues. So,
but there's no extra bulk in that, right? Because you can still put it into, and it'll fit snugly into, whether like the Super Nintendo slot, the Sega slot, any of those things.
Yeah, it's everything's sort of designed and measured out to still work properly and like fit right into the console, so they don't like wiggle around or anything like that.
Do you have a favorite game, either here on display or not, or can you not say that and get in trouble?
I'm gonna get in trouble. No, I'll answer Little Medusa for sure. I love that game.
That's been the popular one. What about Little Medusa really kind of comes out for you there?
I think it's just a mix between the character designs have a lot of personality to them. They're great to look at. You know, you connect with the main character the second you see her on the title screen, and that, along with just it's a simple style of gameplay where you only have two real base abilities that you have, but the fact that we were able to iterate on it so much over 66 levels in that game, like, really, we just got to have so much, just that game is just overflowing with creativity.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. So you already brought up, you've been a fan for a while. You know, you grew up with games. Were you a Sega guy or a Super Nintendo guy?
Oh, everyone hates me at the office. I'm a Super Nintendo guy all day.
Thank you. Okay, God, I don't know what's wrong with the rest of your team, but I'm absolutely there with you. Why?
I mean, I think because it's what I grew up with. I remember when I was real young, you know, real little kid, and the Super Nintendo just came out. I obviously wasn't going to have one. My parents weren't going to rush out and buy a new console right away, so I was at a cousin's house, and he had it, and he had Super Mario World for it, and he's like, let's try it out, let's play it, and he puts it in, and I just remember being blown away by it. I was just like, this is like everything I've been playing for the past 5 years, but just taken up to a new level that I could barely process what I was seeing, you know.
Oh, so I'm gonna make this one a little bit difficult for you. Favorite Super Nintendo game not made by Nintendo or SquareSoft, because everyone always throws those ones out there. I want to get more like the hidden gems, or the ones that people don't talk about nearly as much. Do you have a favorite one of those?
I wouldn't really call this like a hidden gem, but like Castlevania 4, like Super Castlevania, that game's... Oh, yeah. That game, it was an early release on the console. It wasn't too late in the console's lifespan, but I think it really showed everyone what it could do, like what the SNES was capable of. There's like a lot of cool like Mode 7 stuff, where like the screen's rotating and you have to like deal with that, and I think it really sort of set the standard for a lot of stuff, and so that makes that game fantastic to me.
Now, working on those systems, has that changed your mind in a little bit, or has it been interesting to be like, oh, this is so much easier than that one? Like, how's that process and working on that, and just kind of sitting there being like, this, you know, does it make sense why a lot of people chose one over the other, looking kind of from a technical standpoint?
So I'm gonna sort of change the question a little bit.
Okay.
Well, you originally asked me like what I grew up with and what I enjoyed. If you're asking me professionally what I like to work with, the Genesis all day. It's a pretty elegant console from a technical side, where, you know, you can just sort of plug in, make a game for it, no headaches. And then the SNES just has so much that it can do that it's just this huge powerhouse that you have to like work around and like figure out how these like really powerful features on this console work and function. And so it's definitely a lot more just like hands dirty work to work with the SNES.
So it seems like the SNES has almost more possibilities there, but, you know, by having more, it makes it more complicated and therefore a little harder to kind of move forward with that. Are there any points, because you guys have done some games where it's for both systems, are there any scenarios where you've almost had to scale back on the Super Nintendo one because the Sega couldn't pull that off, or vice versa?
So Little Medusa is a pretty good example of us doing it in the most efficient way possible. We did it for the NES initially. That was the first release of it, and then we wanted to do the 16-bit version. So we sat down, we planned it out, and we're like, all right, let's do everything for the Genesis, And that way, when it comes to the SNES stuff, like Genesis stuff will work on the SNES, but it might not necessarily work the other way around. So it would be a lot easier to start with the Genesis, then move to the SNES.
Right.
We have some stuff in progress right now where we're doing it the other way, and we're finding that there's definitely more technical hurdles doing it that way.
A little harder to...
But I think in the end, it's going to give us a little bit more potential out of the Genesis, having to scale things back instead of just sort of moving from one console to the other. So I think it's going to be a good thing.
How much do people's eyes light up when you tell them what you do? Lord knows mine have multiple times today. So
that's why I wake up in the morning, man. That's what I'm in it for. I love just the people who come out at shows and just getting so invested in it, and it's like, I mean, I'm sure it's what our parents felt when they bought us a new game, you know, like for Christmas, and we opened it up and we went nuts. I imagine that's what that feeling is. And so it's been great. It's great every time we get to go to a show and I get to see that firsthand.
It's great. How's it been here, you know, at the Games Conference so far? You were telling me earlier off camera that you're kind of been the go-to guy for demoing the games a lot of the time there. What have been the reactions here? I feel like you're getting everybody from, you know, kind of the guys low on the totem pole all the way up to CEOs and stuff here. And everyone looks like adults, right? They're dressed in their suits. They're dressed, you know, buttoned down. But then you kind of, do you see the kid at heart when they come by your booth? Because all of a sudden this thing from, you know, years ago, they're getting to play something new and hold that controller in their hand again.
Totally, and I think that's kind of what makes what we do special. Is that the second you sit down and put an SNES controller in your hands, you're right back into your childhood, and to get to sort of experience something new through that lens is always such an amazing thing to observe. That's why I love getting to work these kind of booths, is that I get to see it for 12 hours a day, like for a few days, you know. That's awesome. And it's such a good feeling.
So you guys have kind of run the gamut. I feel like, you know, you've got Little Medusa, which is like a puzzle game, right? Coffee Crisis seems kind of like a beat 'em up. Logjammers has sort of that tennis, almost Windjammers kind of feel to it. You know, and not so much you need to go into if there are things that are still secret about what's coming up next. But for you, if you got to like kind of just carte blanche pick what genre you guys worked on next and did, what would you really like to do?
We don't have really, at least out, I'm not going to go too into like what projects we have going on, but action platformer like Ninja Gaiden, Castlevania, like Contra, that kind of stuff, we don't really have much out for yet, and that's always been my favorite genre. So that's where I'm hoping like our next wave sort of moves into that space a little bit more.
Cool. And we've seen a little bit of a resurgence now, I think. And I mean, there's always been the classic resurgence, especially with indie games of going for an art style. But now we're starting to see this with things like the NES Classic, the Super NES Classic, Neo Geo Mini Arcade. All these kind of companies are coming out with that. Are you guys starting to see opportunities there of whether it's like having a classic style hardware that your game's on, or if these guys open stores up within the system, if the infrastructure's there, to be able to have your stuff on these kind of systems? Like what is this new like classic hardware resurgence mean for you guys?
My dream is by the end of next year to have Mega Cat games on the Virtual Console service on the Switch. I mean, there's nothing stopping it technically from being able to work. We're not using some weird new board type or anything. Like, everything is still designed to spec to the consoles, so it would totally be possible to just plug Logjammers into a Virtual Console wrapper and it would work.
Yeah.
And so that would be like just something else to me, like to have that on, especially like the Switch's new Virtual Console service, which I think is great. Have something like Logjammers on there. That'd be amazing.
That'd be absolutely insane. I know a lot of things that especially I think you bring up the Switch, and I think there's a very interesting thing going on right there where people are starting to get concerned about too much in the market, right? And I think almost discoverability on these different platforms. I think iOS is long gone with that. Same with Android. Switch is trying to release 3 to 5 indie games. What was it, a week, a day, almost? It's getting nuts. Is this a challenge you guys also feel like you're running into a little bit here, the ability to stand out, or because you guys have done so much with hardware in this, do you actually find it's almost an easier selling point?
Yeah, I think the hardware side of things, making games that work on those consoles, is so unique, and it leaves a pretty strong lasting impression on people, so that helps a lot. I know when I've been talking to people about Coffee Crisis today, I've been telling them about how we did it in partnership with a coffee shop, and they have a permanent installation in the shop of Coffee Crisis on a Genesis, and it's been great for them because like people remember that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so I think that helps out. That helps out a lot. It definitely helps out when we're reaching out to other businesses. Like, hey, look at this crazy, unique thing that we do that no one else is really doing. You know.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting point of being able to have that in not like, you know, arcades now become more of like this barcade specialty thing, but having the coffee shop, I have at least, you know, 2 bars near me that aren't arcadey bars, but still have a crappy old TV and a Nintendo plugged in, and someone's still drunkenly trying to play Duck Hunt as best as possible. So the opportunities for that kind of stuff in other stores, I think, you know, still get a pop out of people, which is really cool. So are there any talks or anything that you're excited to see here coming up?
The VR AR stuff is going to be pretty interesting. We've been moving into that space with our modern platform development, so it will be nice to, you know, get to hear from some more veteran industry leaders in that sort of realm.
Can you get like VR working with Mode 7 graphics for really trippy, like classic feeling?
I have a couple of documents written down about doing something kind of like Doom 2 style in VR. Yeah,
that'd be crazy.
Yeah, that's definitely something I would love to do at some point.
All the great flat sprite 3D things where no matter where you turn, they're all facing you. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. This has been really cool. Before I let you go, where can people, you know, online find you if they want to talk to you, or find MegaCat and learn more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, go ahead and check us out on megacatstudios.com. MegaCat Studios across all social media. If you hop on the Coffee Crisis or Logjammers Steam communities, I'm in there talking to people. So yeah, I'm around.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. This has been great, and thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. We'll have plenty more coming from the New York Games Conference. Thank you, guys.